Mystical City of God. Book 2, Chapter 6, on the virtue of faith and its exercise in the Most Holy Mary. In few words, St. Elizabeth, as recorded by the evangelist St. Luke, Luke 1 verse 45, summarized the greatness of the faith of the Most Holy Mary when she said, "Blessed are you who believed, for what was spoken to you by the Lord shall be fulfilled." The happiness and beatitude of this great lady and her ineffable dignity must be measured by her faith, for it was of such a kind and so excellent. By having believed, she attained the greatest height after God himself. She believed the greatest sacrament of all sacraments and mysteries that were to be wrought within her. The prudence and divine knowledge of Our Lady Mary in giving credence to so new and never before seen a truth surpassed all human and angelic understanding. Her faith could only have been formed in the divine forge of the Almighty's immense power, where all the virtues of this queen were fashioned by his sovereign hand. I always find myself halted and slow when trying to speak of these virtues, and even more so of the preceding ones. For though I have been given great understanding and light concerning them, the limits of human language make it difficult to express the concepts and acts of faith formed in the intellect and soul of the most faithful of all creatures, or rather, the one who is more faithful than all creatures combined. I will say what I can, acknowledging my incapacity to fulfill the longing of my desire, and even more so the greatness of the subject. The faith of the Most Holy Mary was a wonder to all of created nature and a manifest prodigy of divine power. And because in her this virtue of faith existed in the highest and most perfect degree it could possibly attain, she in great measure, and in some manner, satisfied God for the lack of faith that would be found among men. The Most High granted this excellent virtue to the mortal pilgrims of earth, so that, unimpeded by their mortal flesh, they might have knowledge of the divinity, his mysteries, and his wondrous works, knowledge so certain, infallible, and secure in truth that it would be as if they saw God face to face, just as the blessed angels do. The very same object in truth that the angels see with clarity, we believe under the veil and obscurity of faith. This grand benefit, poorly understood and even more poorly appreciated by mortals, is clearly shown when we turn our eyes to the world and see how many nations, kingdoms, and provinces have rejected it since the beginning. How many have unhappily cast it off, even though the Lord granted it with generous mercy? And how many faithful, having received it unworthily, have rendered it barren and treated it as a mockery, idle, ineffective, and fruitless in guiding them to the final end toward which it points and leads. It was thus fitting to divine justice that such a tragic loss be somehow compensated, and that so incomparable a gift receive a return fitting and proportionate to it, as much as this was possible in creatures. There had to be at least one in whom this virtue of faith would exist in the most perfect degree, as a model and measure for all others. All of this was fulfilled in the great faith of the Most Holy Mary. And for her alone, had she been the only creature in the world, God would have most fittingly created and instituted the excellent virtue of faith, for she alone fulfilled the expectations of divine providence, so that, in our way of understanding, God would not suffer any lack on the part of mankind, nor would the formation of this virtue be rendered vain by the little return he would receive from mortals. This defect was compensated by the faith of the sovereign queen, who copied within herself the divine idea of this virtue with the utmost possible perfection. All other believers may measure themselves by the faith of this lady. They will be more or less faithful, depending on how closely they conform to the perfection of her incomparable faith, and for this reason she was chosen to be the teacher and model of all believers. Patriarchs, prophets, apostles, martyrs, and all those who have believed or will believe in the articles of the Christian faith until the end of the world. Some might wonder how it could be said that the Queen of Heaven exercised faith, considering that she many times had clear visions of the divinity, and even more often had abstractive visions, which also grant evident knowledge to the intellect, as was explained above. Cf. Nos 229 and 237, and will be repeated later throughout the work. The doubt arises because faith, as the Apostle says, Hebrews 11 verse 1, is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. This means that of the things we hope for in our final end, beatitude, we have no other presence, substance, or essence, while we are pilgrims on earth, than that which is contained in the object of faith, believed in obscurity and as through a mirror. However, the strength of this infused habit, which inclines us to believe what we do not see, and the infallible certainty of what is believed, provide a sure and effective argument for the intellect, and give the will the confidence to believe what it desires and hopes for without fear. According to this teaching, if the Most Holy Virgin did indeed, during her life, see and possess God, who is the very object of our faith, without the veil of obscure faith, it would seem that there remained no obscurity for her to believe in faith what she had already seen clearly and face to face. This is especially true if the images acquired during the clear or evident vision of the divinity remained in her intellect. This difficulty does not diminish the faith of the Most Holy Mary. In fact, it elevates and glorifies it. For the Lord willed that his mother be so admirable in the privilege of this virtue of faith, and the same is true of hope, that she would transcend the ordinary order of the rest of the pilgrims on earth. To make her both teacher and exemplar of these great virtues, her excellent intellect was at times illuminated by the most perfect acts of faith and hope, and at other times by vision and possession, though only briefly, of the end and object which she believed in and hoped for. In this way, she could know and taste these truths in their original form, so as to teach others to believe them by the virtue of faith. To combine these two realities in the most holy soul of Mary was well within the power of God, and being so, it was fitting for his most pure mother, to whom no privilege, however great, was unworthy, and from whom none should be withheld. It is true that the clarity of what we see is incompatible with the obscurity of faith, by which we believe what we do not see, and that hope is incompatible with possession. Therefore, when the Most Holy Mary enjoyed these clear visions, or when she used the species that, even though abstractive, manifested things with evident clarity, she did not exercise the obscure acts of faith, nor use its habit, but rather only that of infused knowledge. Nevertheless, this did not render the habits of the two theological virtues, faith and hope, inactive. For in order that Mary most pure might exercise them, the Lord would suspend the influx or halt the use of the clear and evident species by which the current knowledge would cease, and the obscure faith would begin to operate. In this most perfect state, the sovereign queen would remain at times, while the Lord withdrew from her all clear manifestations, as happened in the most exalted mystery of the incarnation of the Word, of which I will speak in its place, cf. Infra Part 2, Nos 119. 133. It was not fitting that the Mother of God be deprived of the reward of these infused virtues of faith and hope. And to obtain that reward she had to merit it, and to merit it she had to exercise their proper acts. And just as her reward was incomparable, so too were the acts of faith performed by this great lady in all and each of the Catholic truths. For she knew and believed them all explicitly with the highest and most perfect belief as a pilgrim. Clearly, when the intellect has evidence of what it knows, it does not await the consent of the will to believe, for it is compelled by the clarity itself to give firm assent, even before the will commands it. Thus, that act of believing what one cannot deny is not meritorious. But when the Most Holy Mary gave her assent to the message of the Archangel, she was worthy of an incomparable reward, because in her assent to that mystery she merited. The same occurred with the other truths she believed, when the Most High willed that she use infused faith and not infused knowledge, although even in the latter there was merit, due to the love she exercised through it, as I have explained in various places. Cf. Supra Nosp 231, 380, 383. Neither was she given the use of infused knowledge when she lost the child Jesus, at least not to know his whereabouts, though she knew many other things through that light, nor did she then use the clear species of the divinity. The same happened at the foot of the cross, where the Lord suspended the visions and operations which, in her most holy soul, would have lessened the pain. For at that moment it was fitting that she endure pain and exercise only faith and hope. Any joy she would have had from any vision or knowledge, even if abstract, of the divinity would have naturally lessened her suffering, unless God had worked a new miracle to allow both pain and joy to coexist. But it was not appropriate for the Lord to perform such a miracle, since it was through suffering that the Queen of Heaven would most perfectly merit and imitate her most holy Son, along with receiving the graces proper to her role as mother. For this reason, she sought the child with sorrow, Luke 2, verse 48, as she herself said, and with living faith and hope. These same virtues she exercised during the passion and resurrection of her only and beloved Son, in whom she believed and hoped, remaining in her alone the faith of the Church, as if that virtue were at that time reduced to its mistress and foundress. 3 particular qualities or perfections may be noted in the faith of the Most Holy Mary: its continuity, its intensity, and the understanding with which she believed. Its continuity was interrupted only when she beheld the divinity with intuitive clarity or abstractive evidence, as I have already said, but in the distribution of the interior acts of divine knowledge that the Queen of Heaven had, though only the Lord, who arranged them, can know precisely when and in what moments. Her most holy mother exercised at one time these acts and at another those. Yet her intellect was never idle, not for a single instant of her life, from the very first of her conception, in which she lost sight of God. If faith was suspended, it was because she was enjoying the vision of the divinity, either clearly or through the most sublime infused knowledge. If the Lord hid this knowledge from her, then faith resumed its operation. In this succession and alternation of acts, there was a most harmonious rhythm in the mind of the Most Holy Mary, to which the Most High invited the angelic spirits to pay attention, as is written in the Song of Songs, chapter 8. You who dwell in the gardens, companions, are listening for your voice. Let me hear it. In the efficacy or intensity of her faith, this sovereign princess surpassed all the apostles, prophets, and saints together, and she reached the highest degree that pure creature could attain. Not only did she surpass all the faithful, but she possessed the faith that was lacking in all the unbelievers who have not believed. And through her faith alone, all might have been enlightened. In her, therefore, it remained firm, immovable, and constant, when even the apostles failed during the Passion, so much so that if all temptations, deceptions, errors, and falsehoods in the world had combined, they could not have opposed or disturbed the invincible faith of the Queen of the Faithful. As foundress and teacher of all believers, she would have conquered them all and emerged victorious and triumphant. The clarity or understanding with which the most pure Mary explicitly believed all the divine truths cannot be conveyed in words without obscuring it in the attempt. Mary Most Pure knew everything she believed and believed everything she knew. For the infused theological knowledge of the credibility of the mysteries of the faith and their understanding was present in this most wise Virgin and Mother to the highest degree possible for a pure creature. She possessed this knowledge and angelic memory in act, never forgetting what she once learned. And she always used these powers and gifts to believe profoundly, except when, by divine disposition, God ordained that she suspend her acts of faith, as I said above, cf. Supra Noscun 494, 467. And although she was not a comprehensor, in her state as a pilgrim she had, for the purpose of believing and knowing God, the highest and most immediate understanding possible within the sphere of faith, with a clear knowledge of the divinity transcending the condition of all other wayfarers, being alone in a class and state of pilgrim that no other has reached. And if, for Mary Most Holy, the state in which she exercised the habits of faith and hope was her most ordinary, and thus her lowest state, and in it she exceeded all the saints and angels, and surpassed them in merit through greater acts of love, what then must she have accomplished, merited, and loved when she was raised by divine power to other benefits and higher states of the beatific vision, or clear knowledge of the divinity? If even an angelic understanding would lack the strength to grasp or penetrate this, how shall a mere earthly creature find words to express it? I would wish at least that all mortals come to understand the value and worth of this virtue of faith, by contemplating it in this divine exemplar, in whom it reached its ultimate perfection, and fulfilled its purpose. Let the unbelievers, heretics, pagans, and idolaters come to the teacher of faith, Most Holy Mary, to be enlightened in their errors and darkness, and they will find the sure path to attain the final end for which they were created. Let Catholics, too, approach her, and recognize the abundant reward of this excellent virtue, and let them ask the Lord with the apostles to increase their faith, Luke 17, verse 5. Not so as to equal that of Mary Most Holy, but to imitate and follow her. For in her faith she teaches us and gives us hope that we might obtain it through her most high merits. The Patriarch Abraham was called by St. Paul, Romans 4, verse 11, the father of all believers, because he was the first to receive the promises of the Messiah and believed all that God promised him, hoping against hope, Romans 4, verse 18. That is to say, the excellence of the Patriarch's faith is shown in that he first believed the promises of the Lord, even when there was no natural hope left in the causes. He believed that his barren wife Sarah would bear him a son, and when later commanded to sacrifice that son to God, he still believed that the innumerable offspring promised to him, Genesis 15, verse 5, would somehow come from Isaac. All this, which was naturally impossible, Abraham believed would be fulfilled by divine power supernaturally. For this faith he was called the father of all believers, and received the sign of faith in which he had been justified, which was circumcision. But our preeminent Lady Mary has greater titles and prerogatives than Abraham to be called Mother of Faith and of all believers. In her hands is raised the banner and standard of faith for all who believe under the law of grace. Abraham came first in time, and was initially made father and head of the Hebrew people. His faith in the promises of Christ our Lord and the words of the Most High was great and excellent. Yet in all these things the faith of Mary Most Pure was incomparably more admirable, and thus she holds the first place in dignity. It was a greater difficulty or impossibility for a virgin to conceive and give birth than for an old and barren woman. Moreover, the Patriarch Abraham was not as certain that the sacrifice of Isaac would be carried out, as Most Holy Mary was certain that her most holy Son would indeed be sacrificed. And it was she who, in all the mysteries, believed, hoped, and taught the entire Church how it should believe in the Most High and the works of redemption. Recognizing the faith of Mary our Queen, she is the mother of believers and the exemplar of Catholic faith and holy hope. And to conclude this chapter, I say that Christ, our Redeemer and Teacher, because he was a comprehensor and his most holy soul enjoyed the highest glory and beatific vision, did not have faith, nor could he exercise it, nor could he be the teacher of that virtue by his own acts. But what the Lord could not do personally in this regard, he accomplished through his most holy mother, establishing her as the foundress, mother, and exemplar of the faith of his evangelical Church, so that, on the day of universal judgment, this sovereign lady and queen might assist as judge alongside her most holy Son, to judge those who did not believe, having been given her example in the world. Doctrine of the Mother of God and Our Lady. My daughter, the inestimable treasure of the virtue of divine faith is hidden from mortals who have only earthly and fleshly eyes, for they do not know how to give it the value and esteem demanded by such a gift and benefit of incomparable worth. Consider well, dearest, how the world was without faith, and how it would be today if my Son and Lord did not preserve it. How many men, celebrated by the world as great, powerful, and wise, have, for lack of the light of faith, plunged from the darkness of their unbelief into abominable sins, and from there into the eternal darkness of hell. How many kingdoms and provinces have been, and still are, blindly led by these blinder guides, until all fall together into the pit of eternal punishment. Following them are the bad believers and unfaithful Christians. Though they have received the grace and gift of faith, live as if they did not possess it in their souls. Do not forget, my friend, to give thanks for this precious pearl the Lord has given you, as a pledge and bond of the espousal he has celebrated with you, to lead you first into the bridal chamber of his holy Church, and afterward to that of his eternal beatific vision. Always exercise this virtue of faith, for it places you near the ultimate end toward which you journey and the object you desire and love. Faith is what teaches the sure path to eternal happiness. It is the light that shines in the darkness of the mortal life of pilgrims, and it safely leads them to the possession of their true homeland, where they were meant to walk, were they not dead in infidelity and sin. Faith awakens the other virtues. It feeds the just and sustains them in their labors. It confounds and terrifies the unfaithful and the lukewarm believers, negligent in their deeds. For it reveals to them in this life their sins, and in the next, the punishment that awaits them. Faith is powerful for all things, for to the one who believes, nothing is impossible. Okay. 9:22. Rather, through it, all things can be done and obtained. It enlightens and ennobles the human understanding, for it trains the soul not to err in the darkness of natural ignorance, and lifts it above itself, so it may see and understand with infallible certainty what it could never reach on its own, believing with assurance as if it were seen with clarity. Faith strips the soul of its grossness and baseness, that wretched condition in which man believes only what he himself can grasp, though his understanding is so limited while his soul is imprisoned in the corruptible body and subject to the crude use of the senses. Therefore, my daughter, cherish this precious pearl of the Catholic faith that God has given you. Guard it and practice it with reverence and profound gratitude.